So think about this for a second. How did our ancestors keep track of time, long before writing or calendars or smartphones? Well, we're about to dive into a prehistoric mystery where the answer, well, it might just be carved right into the very bones they left behind.
I mean, it's a really fundamental question, isn't it? If your survival literally depends on knowing when to move, when to hunt, or when certain plants are ready to harvest, you can't just rely on your memory. You absolutely need a system.
And that system, that ancient piece of what you might call information technology, could be these incredible artifacts. We're talking about bones with these carefully carved notches found in caves across what is now Israel and Jordan. This is really the central clue in our whole investigation.
All right, so let's start trying to decode these objects and see what they can really tell us about the minds of our ancestors.
You can almost think of it like an external hard drive for the prehistoric brain. It's not storing, complex words or anything like that, but what it does do is incredibly powerful. It lets you offload your memory, storing a sequence of counts, one simple mark at a time.
Okay, next up, let's look at the clues from the caves themselves, because the place where these bones were found, that's a huge piece of the puzzle. In archaeology, as they say, context is absolutely everything.
So here's the logic, and it makes a lot of sense when you break it down. First, we know early humans lived seasonally. They were following animal migrations around. And that kind of life requires some serious planning, right? You can't just wing it. So what's the most reliable clock they had? Well, it was right up there in the sky, the moon, with its super predictable cycle. So it follows that they would have needed some kind of physical tool to actually track the passing days. So, okay, we've got a motive. Now let's get a closer look at the evidence, the marks themselves, and try to figure out if they're intentional or just, random accidents.
And this is where it gets really fascinating, because you can see the difference archaeologists are looking for. On the one hand, you've got these random, messy scratches. Could be anything. Maybe an animal was gnawing on the bone. But on the other side, whoa, that's different. You can see purpose. The notches are grouped, they're patterned, they just look intentional, like they were clearly made by a human hand. So what we're looking at its core is a tally system. It's super simple, right? One notch equals one unit. One day, one hunt, whatever was being counted. But don't let that simplicity fool you. This is a massive cognitive leap. It frees up your brain from having to keep a running count of everything in your head. You're offloading that memory onto a physical object.
Which brings us to the leading theory, the big one. Could these bones actually be calendars?
The idea that it's a lunar calendar is just so compelling. I love this idea of the moon being like a natural app in the sky. It has this clear, repeating cycle. Anyone can see it, from anywhere. And a notched bone, that would be the perfect offline tool to track it. And you have to remember, this wasn't just for curiosity. This was a survival tool. A calendar based on the moon could help you time your movements, plan your hunts, organize rituals, even coordinate with other groups of people, all using this shared language of time. It was basically fundamental to organizing a society. But you know how it is in archaeology. It's almost never that simple. So let's be good detectives here and consider some of the other plausible explanations for what these marks could be. So what else could it be? Well, it could just be a simple inventory tally, right? Counting tools, maybe dividing up food after a big hunt, or it could be an event counter, like we saw 10 bison today, or our guests stayed for 5 days. And then there's the possibility that it's purely symbolic, part of some ritual that honestly we might never fully understand. The thing is, all of these theories are plausible, and each one tells a slightly different story about what was important to our ancestors. And this really gets at a key challenge in archaeology. One single pattern can have so many different explanations. A set of 29 notches? To us, that just screams lunar cycle. But to the person who actually carved it, it might have meant something completely different. We just have to work with what seems most likely. But here's the thing. Let's zoom out for a second. Regardless of its exact purpose, whether it was a calendar, a shopping list, or something else entirely, this simple little object marks a huge cognitive leap. You're looking at the dawn of the very first information age. So what does this actually tell us? Well, it gives us a window into the prehistoric mind. It shows us people who were planning for the future, not just living in the moment. It shows they were capable of abstract thought, using one little mark as a symbol to represent one thing. That is a huge deal. That's the very foundation of both language and art. And if other people understood it, well, that points to a shared culture and a way to pass complex knowledge down from one generation to the next. And that, ultimately, is why these artifacts are so breathtaking. A notched bone,
It's so small and simple and silent, but it represents one of the very first steps towards storing information outside of the human brain. It's the ancient ancestor of writing, of mathematics, and even of modern computing. It really makes you wonder, what other secrets about our origins are still out there, just waiting to be decoded?